Welcome back, movie lovers, to another episode of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host, John Webster, and as usual, I'm accompanied by my co-host, Amy Blackfire. And today we're joined by our special returning guest, Cliff Broadway, also known as QuickBeam from theonering.net. How are you doing, Cliff?
Hello, everybody. Hello out there. How are you today, everybody? Nice to see you.
Yeah,
I'm great, thank you. I'm just having a very merry afterglow. This is for most of the world, it's Boxing Day, but for here in my little corner of America, it's just the afterglow of Christmas is still here, and it's really lovely to be invited. Thank you both. Thank you both so much.
Yeah, I know we tried to make it work to have you on last week for Return of the Caine, but that didn't work out, but that's actually worked out for the best because you're a big Henson fan, Cliff.
I am. Oh my gosh. The Jim Henson studios are only a couple of blocks away from me, right down La Brea Avenue, right down here.
God, yeah, and of course people will know you came on we had a wonderful Dark Crystal discussion.
Yes. I mean, at any point in time, I can, shout in the distance, and that giant Kermit statue that hovers over La Brea Avenue, he's dressed as Charlie Chaplin, and it's just the lovable vagabond. And there's certainly secrets behind those walls, and I can hear them. I can hear the Muppets whispering to me as I go by every afternoon. I turn the century back in time, and there was nothing but pistachio groves and orange groves in the entire area around here, and a few dirt roads. And then this enterprising young man, Charlie Chaplin, decided to build the very first motion picture sound stages that were built here in Hollywood, and it is now the home of the Muppets, and they've converted buildings next door to be, adjunct Muppets workshop, where they're creating characters for the delight of generations of people. It's literally here, a few blocks from my house. I feel very much a part of things, and I could go on for days and days about the wonderful mythology of Thra, and I remember that discussion very, very well. And my apologies to your audience for going into the weeds a bit with that. We did get into some granular bits with that conversation, didn't we? We did.
That was fantastic. Like
Geeking out is not allowed on this channel, Cliff. How dare you?
I think all three of us are on board for any amount of Dark Crystal discussion, because Amy, you're also a fan of it, and Age of Resistance. You were very.
I am. I was in the chat mourning along with you guys when you were doing that that live stream, and yeah, I have a lot of words for Netflix because they keep renewing some things and dropping others, and a lot of other places say, everyone's experiencing COVID-19. Why is it that Netflix is the main, one that's hemorrhaging money and not being able to allegedly afford a lot of these things? So anyway, we'll keep that on the DL. But it is a great love of mine. When I was in after-school program, I was born in '93, the year of Muppet Christmas Carol. So I'm a '90s kid. And I grew up in after school each week on Fridays. We'd have movie nights, and you could pick the movie, and I picked Dark Crystal every time. So every time it was my turn, no one even asked. They just grabbed Dark Crystal and put it in the TV on VHS, and that's what we watched. So I was a huge fan of the original, and so whenever the show came out, I got so excited, and it was great to share my excitement with John. And so and when I was little, like the Skeksis scared me. But I'm a horror fan, so I like to be scared. And I had some friends in after school who would kind of hide their eyes. That's how scary it was for kids. And I really appreciate the world building that one movie was able to kind of encourage. So yeah, I'm also a big fan, and I really was having a great time when you came on last time, Cliff. And wish we could have had you for Return of the King, but we're glad to have you back.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And to Guilty Undertaker in the live chat, if you haven't seen the new Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, I have nothing else to say except hyperbole. Anything that will come out of my mouth will sound like outrageousness. So believe me, it is beyond worth it, especially because of, it's a legacy property. that is really, really beloved by a lot of people. And in all the ways that it could have gone wrong, the Netflix series actually did right. They did right. They did a great job. Knocked it out of the park, which leads everyone to the concurrent conversation about how tragic and weird it was that Netflix let it go, especially after they built the infrastructure and had all the things ready to go, the platforms, the sets. I mean, we're going to talk about this now in our movie of The Muppet Christmas Carol, but it's not cheap. It is not cheap to create this stratified, motion picture environment where you have two types of performers constantly looking out for one another at two different eye lines. And it's twice the trouble, twice the physical properties in dealing with, and twice the insurance, I'm sure. If you were signing off on, the person, there are those people who have to sign off on, did Michael Caine split his ankle today by accidentally stepping through, and it was a fear. During the Muppet Christmas Carol, everyone's looking out for Michael, who is their number one star, and they're actually trying to make sure he's on these narrow slats trying to perform with the room to occupy the Muppet performers adjacent to him. So yeah, in concurrent conversations, you want to talk about how fascinating and difficult it is to actually get through this type of production. It is unique. For any performer, it is unique to be stuck in a green room with nobody to perform with except a floating green ball on a stick. But imagine that the real performers are right there with you, with the Muppets, just 4 feet below the floor. I just can't imagine.
Yeah,
and also, GU, I will say, when you're talking about kind of ahead of its time, what I like about the new one, and this isn't a terrible spoiler for anyone, is the highlight of female leadership, which just, as a feminist, endears me to the property even more with Age of Resistance. So, GU, seriously, what are you doing, man? After you're done with this stream, gotta start that. Pull up Netflix and check it out, because it's definitely worth it.
We are the Simpsons mob coming with the pitchforks and the torches.
Cassie, I'm not highlighting your shame, but I just want to drive home. Watch the show.
Watch it.
It's really good.
Yeah. I've rewatched it 4 or 5 times, especially when there was a campaign to try and save it. I was like, I don't even know if these count as extra watches, but I'm doing it anyway. Yes, please watch Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance and the original if you haven't already. But I guess we needed to also talk about Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yeah, that's our digression. Now we'll move on to our actual topic. I actually do want to start with you, though, Amy, because correct me if I'm wrong, this was your first time seeing the movie?
I actually thought so, but then when I was watching it, I remembered I had some flashbacks, because I watched the Muppets when I was little, but I can't tell you if I've seen all of them. And so my canon, quote unquote, Christmas Carol was an animated one from the late 90s that was always on TV around Christmas in the early 2000s. I was going to look it up, but I didn't do my homework for the stream. But yeah, no, I actually had seen it, but this was my first time as an adult. And I didn't really remember that many scenes. The main scenes that I remembered was the part with Rizzo and the puppet that's pretending to be Charles Dickens when they're in the school and they have the shelf constantly going back and forth. I really like that. The kind of part of the narration is what I remembered. And I also remembered Miss Piggy, who was playing, it was Mrs. Cratchit, correct? How she was ready to give Scrooge a piece of her mind. I always remember the Miss Piggy stuff because she was my favorite growing up. And so I always remember her kind of her emotion as well, her anger toward Mr. Scrooge, and of course her sadness when we do have the alternate universe of Tiny Tim's terrible demise, which made me cry again. But yeah, and you always know that it's showing him the future, but the future can change. But it's still everyone loves Tiny Tim. So so this was my first time watching it as an adult, and it touched me in a way that I was surprised. I thought that I'd be oh, this is cute, remember childhood, but it really made me feel a lot of feelings that I was not expecting.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely, there's a reason why, like, it's my go-to Christmas movie. Like, Christmas Day is not complete unless I've watched the Muppet Christmas
Like, I think
Carol.
I was like messaging you, John, and being like, no, why? Like every other scene.
Cliff, I want to sort of hand it over to you. I mean, obviously you're a Henson fan from way back. What's your history with this movie? Did you see it in theaters?
I did. I saw it in theaters when it came out, and I have to say, I was one of the unfortunate moviegoers who had to experience it with one of its most important and memorable songs cut from the theatrical release. Uh, the, the song with Ebenezer Scrooge looking at his romantic failure of the past. And the song that they sing together was cut in the theatrical release of it. And so when I saw it a year later, a couple of years later, when it was out on VHS tape, I was like, really? Wow, there's this whole musical number in here that wasn't in. But what struck me as one of the most memorable things was that long opening shot over this miniature village, and you weren't quite sure if it was miniature or not, but it was a really cool long camera coming over the rooftops, the misty rooftops of London. Remember that?
Yeah,
it takes
it's
forever,
beautiful.
and the credits are slowly, gently coming and going, and you're like, Brian Henson, that's Jim's son, and you started to realize that this was the first time we were going back to the movies to see a Muppet film in theaters after Jim Henson had passed away. So it was I was enthused about Brian Henson and his taking over his dad's place. That seemed like, I don't know. That's why the word legacy keeps coming to mind. And that was the first time. I didn't know all those details at the time, but it was the very first directing feature film job that Brian Henson had. And I was so into Gonzo because he's always been my favorite character from the show. By far, I have this real identity click with one character out of the entire entourage from the original run of the Muppets, which was the best musical variety series that ever hit the American television airwaves. You can go on all you want about, Carol Burnett and all those great comedy variety shows of the past, but nobody came close to the magic and all the weird guest stars. I mean, there was an endless parade of who's who, and it was always that funny interaction of one live person per week to be matched with the crazy ensemble of Muppet personalities, which was obviously Kermit's job as stage manager, but he was also lead psychiatrist for all these crazy, out-of-control Muppets. And then all of a sudden you had an extra personality, one human being who brought their own sprinkle of unique humor or talent to the show. Week by week, it was always a parade. So much within that framework of understanding the Muppets versus one human being, this motion picture, Muppet Christmas Carol, decided to do it differently. Because all the other Muppet movies before that had a very wide group of cameos of dozens and dozens of different human beings who'd pop in and pop out of the film. But this time, Muppet Christmas Carol went back to the structural roots of how the optics of one human being, from the real world, suddenly being an interloper into the Muppets world. And now it's all, I love that. I love that storyline in the film. I love it.
And Michael Caine does such a great job of playing it straight. In the commentary, Brian Henson talks about in the fact that Michael Caine said he was going to play it as though he were acting against the Royal Shakespeare Company. And I think that's why it works so beautifully, and it's such a heartfelt performance and really makes you feel.
Also, I told you, Steve, if Erin popped in, she'd mention that you shaved, John.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Aaron. I know I broke your heart.
It's literally a crime against humanity for her. I love it. um, what I love is that one of the things about this movie that is so endearing is Gonzo's little kind of commentary of to Rizzo, things such as, I knew you couldn't take, literature, or something like that. Like his kinds of, and then sometimes something will happen, and I forgot what it was, but Rizzo was kind of questioning it, and Gonzo's like, that's how the story goes. This kind of commentary on Dickens' original work I found really fun. And they keep obviously to the basic plot points and everything, but it also is very much a unique Muppets creation. And that's what I love about it, is that they stick with all the story that we all know that Dickens wrote, but they also kind of leave their kind of special fingerprint on it.
They do. Let's talk some more about Michael Caine, everybody, because you're right. That's just it's wild how much he is the strength, and his performance is like what anchors everything. When he decided to play it so purely real, so emotional, and he went for it. It works, and it works so well. It works great.
And like, I do want to also, while we're talking about Michael Caine, talk about that song that you mentioned that was cut out of the theatrical version, because my heart broke actually when they released the remastered DVD and then the Blu-ray, because they pulled that scene back out, because I guess all they had access to was the original theatrical version for the remastered. So the one that's been in circulation for a couple years now has been missing that song. They're about to restore it for an upcoming 4K release. But like, his performance in that scene is so key, because it's the thing that sort of pierces his heart to open him up to discovering, joy and love and the Christmas spirit again.
Yeah, and without that, you don't really, because I watched it without that, and then John messaged me today and said, okay, go into Disney Plus and go to the extras and watch that deleted scene. And because without it, you can't really tell if Scrooge learned the lesson of that scene or not, right? Every scene with each ghost, and there are about 2 to 3 scenes per ghost, he's supposed to be learning a lesson. And when he goes back and is like, oh, I remember that time I got dumped, like it doesn't look like he was learning the lesson. But then with that song, where you do see that she didn't want to say goodbye, but knew that it wasn't going to work, and that obviously he was obsessed with business and not, he wouldn't open his heart up to love fully. That is, then he realizes, oh, okay, it wasn't just I got dumped. I made a mistake. I should have, focused on her and focused on our future together. And that's why I think that scene is so important, because he learns the lesson, which is what Charles Dickens is all about in this story. He's putting Scrooge through all of these things so that he'll learn these lessons about the spirit of Christmas.
Indeed. But the name of the song, thank you to the interwebs, When Love Is Gone, is the name of the beautiful song, which was sung by actress Meredith Braun, who plays Belle against the younger Scrooge. And believe it or not, I'm sure the Lindsay Ellis crowd will appreciate us slamming Jeffrey Katzenberg, but it was Jeffrey Katzenberg who made the insanely stupid decision to cut the song from the theatrical release.
And that song comes back into play at the end of the film, and when they sing "When Love Is Found." So that doesn't even
it comes
make
full circle.
It doesn't make sense to remove that scene. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Yeah, then you have where there is love, then it's, it feels like Christmas. I mean, that means so much more with that scene. And so I'm glad you told me to watch that, John, because otherwise I'd be sitting here being like, I don't know what you're talking about with the scene and all these feels. So I'm glad I watched it, because it makes, and this is what I was telling John when we were talking about a couple of other movies before the stream, is I like when there's something in toward the middle or the beginning of the movie that establishes a theme that then comes full circle in the movie. And this is a scene that clearly is establishing, setting something up. And so if you only have the payoff but not the setup, it feels a little bit empty.
Oh, I want to say hi to AK. Thank you for stopping by.
Hey, AK, I hope you had a good holiday.
Hello, hello. There's a lot of regulars coming in to say hello to us for this conversation, which is really lovely.
Everybody
Happy
loves
holidays,
the Muppets.
everybody. It's great.
And everybody loves you, Cliff. So we've got all the things.
I'm gonna pull up the Disney Plus version, and I'm gonna fast forward to see if they are using the theatrical release from 1992.
It is the theatrical release because I've checked it.
The song doesn't appear.
No, they have it in the extras section.
Yeah,
but it's not in the actual film.
Indeed.
Yeah, so if you go to extras,
right, there it is, right there.
Yeah, so I was able to see it, but you have to consciously go and find it. It's not in the version that you'll see.
Good heavens! Why couldn't Why couldn't the streaming giants give us the version from their library that they put on the VHS tape or on the earlier DVD? Why?
Well, apparently they didn't have the original master or something, but it was announced recently. Brian Henson gave an interview where he said that they had found the original elements, and there's going to be a 4K re-release, presumably for Ultra HD, and that scene has been restored. So it's just a matter of waiting for it now.
And it's 4 minutes, it's not like it makes the movie just too long. I mean, it's an hour and 20 without the scene, so put it in, and it's still not even quite an hour and 30, which is perfect for kids. You need to keep it to an hour and 30. So it's just such a good scene. Like the movie doesn't feel complete without that. And I, obviously always appreciate when the women in the story get more time. Belle gets her own song, and I didn't know that until I watched this. So technically this wasn't my first time watching the Muppet Christmas Carol, but it was my first time watching that scene, and it was so impactful. And it was nice to get more from Belle, because she just goes, "You loved me once," and then it just cuts away. It's like, wait, lady, explain yourself. What are you talking about? And then she has a whole song explaining it. So to take that out is really a disservice to her character and to the love story that she had with Ebenezer.
It draws in sharp relief how little poorly possessed Jeffrey Katzenberg was with any damn story sense at all. Because look at what he did to the Black Cauldron in the editing room. He did the same thing. He went in while all the animators were standing out in the hallway shouting, saying, "Don't do that." And he went in there and locked himself in the room and cut scenes from the Black Cauldron, which still don't fit today with the sound of the score left as it was. So again, the malfeasance of studio interference in something.
Yeah.
It might be why Age of Resistance is such a success compared to, some other things that have been certain incarnations of the Muppets have been relatively more successful than others. I think one of the highlights of the recent attempts was the spoof of The Office, the Muppets that was produced for the ABC television network a couple of years ago that only lasted one season. I thought that was really great fun. That was excellent. And I think it was more fun than Muppets Now, which was the most recent iteration on Disney Plus. But to hell with Jeffrey Katzenberg. He's a buffoon.
And this is now a crapping on Jeffrey stream, so everyone buckle up. No, I'm just kidding.
Merry Christmas, Katzenberg. Merry Christmas to you, buddy. So
you're on Santa's naughty list, and you know why, sir.
Hey, I'm telling you. I mean, let's talk about what remains of the greater success of the film, despite his interference. Was that the song slowed it down, and it was for pacing reasons, blah blah blah, and so whatever. But what is most successful, I think, about this Muppets thing with Michael Caine is that you've got the intrusion of Charles Dickens, played by Gonzo, and he's constantly breaking the fourth wall to talk to you while you're sitting in the theater seat. And there's a lot of playfulness with what Charles Dickens was doing because every time Charles Dickens took Scrooge to the past or to see through the walls of his nephew's house, there was this strangeness of Scrooge talking to the spirit who was with him and breaking the fourth wall of what those characters were in scene, wherever he was, past, present, or future. And they decided to take it to a meta level with Gonzo constantly breaking the fourth wall, talking to us. And it was a very effective way to get the jokes in, to get the meta commentary, Amy, that you already mentioned, as Rizzo making snarky comments about the actual literary style of Dickens himself, and Gonzo being, caught off guard to just defend himself and say it's poetic license, to say what he had to say.
And we get so many lines.
Yeah,
we get so many lines from the book itself. In a lot of ways, it's a more faithful adaptation that you might get in any other film version, because you actually get lines like, the original line is Marley was dead to begin with, and this it's the Marleys were dead to begin with. But lines like that like no character would say them because they're narration, but if you actually have Gonzo standing in for Charles Dickens, you get all these great, examples of Charles Dickens prose, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, and then Rizzo going like, "Why would you start it like that?" And he goes, "That's how it starts." I really love that kind of playfulness with the literature, and it is often, I am a literature major, Chinese literature, but there's still a canon, right, in Chinese literature, just like there is in the English canon, and there is kind of this, you like treat it with this special kind of, put it up on a pedestal, and I think that Christmas Carol has kind of gotten that way, and it is nice to have this really playful kind of treatment of the story where you keep still the morals and the message of the story, but you also go, look, like, Charles Dickens, some of his language is a little opaque, and it's kind of, and a lot of it's kind of macabre, and they kind of play with that a little bit, and it's fun.
My favorite line, "Hey, this stuff is scary. Should we be worried about the kids in the audience?" "No, it's all right. This is culture."
Yes, I love that.
I love that.
Yes,
that is my favorite. That is my favorite one-liner. It's just so wonderful. There's something about the Muppet performers and how they managed to stick together as a family after Jim's death. And I believe it, or if I'm not wrong, this was Steve Whitmire's first time taking on the role of Kermit himself.
Yeah, I remember hearing that, and which is funny because like I grew up with this movie, so that's just the voice of Kermit to me. So it's funny to me that this was a change for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, I obviously think he does a fantastic job.
Yeah, he does. There's a lot of faithfulness in the Robert Zemeckis, Jim Carrey adaptation. And there's a lot of nonsense, but like this extended chase sequence with the funeral chariot and the black horses chasing a tiny miniaturized Ebenezer Scrooge who's running through rain pipes and drain pipes in London and all that nonsense. That I do like the Jim Carrey version for how scary and deeply, deeply scary the early ghost elements are, with the first appearance of Jacob Marley, played by Gary Oldman, who also plays Bob Cratchit, coincidentally. But I like how super scary that is. But when you dial it down and come back to the Muppet version of the two Marleys being much more playful, I really, really like the Statler and Waldorf Marleys. I can't tell you what a relief it is to have Marleys that don't scare me to death. Like, there are small children that would run screaming out of the auditorium when they saw the Robert Zemeckis, Jim Carrey Christmas Carol. It literally terrified kids. But here you've got, this wonderful little number with these guys. I love them. I love these two. As far as I'm concerned, Statler and Waldorf are underutilized. They're my favorite guys. They get the best one-liners. I love these guys. But
Yeah.
Go ahead, John. I'm just reminiscing now because I love it.
Yeah, no, it's funny because they let that, the stariness of the scene kind of play out. It's broken up with commentary by Rizzo and Gonzo, but they still let the moment proceed with kind of teetering on the edge of staring the children in the audience. But then as soon as those characters pop up, it's like, you didn't have anything to be scared about. It's letting the audience kind of laugh about it.
I think what I really liked about the Marley scene too is that, of all of the lessons that Scrooge learns, it's nice to have the very first, people that talk to him are people that said, hey, if you stay on this path, you're going to be like us, right? We were greedy like you and focused on business, and kind of look what happened. And so I kind of like that his first warning is, we were in the same boat you were, and look where we got. So better look out. And then after that, we get, of course, the heartbreaking things. And then, of course, whenever the ghost of Christmas Future comes, it's very literally here's your tombstone, kind of in front of him. But I kind of like that kind of, a lot of people that, a lot of scholars specifically that write about this story, write about the kind of anti-greed, anti-capitalist kind of, commentary. And I like that it is in there in this really fun Muppet, rendition. It's still there, this kind of, it's not just your bah humbug, anti-Christmas spirit. It's also your greed, and your kind of hoarding of the wealth, right? Like there's the commentary of whenever they go into the future, and sorry, I'm jumping around, but that's just what we do here at Jolliff. And they go, oh, I've got his curtains, and they're like, cheap, right? Like he has the money, but he's a cheapo, right? He's a penny pincher. And so to also this kind of idea of, what are you going to do with all that money? When you're dead, you can't take it with you, so what's the point? You should be, be charitable now, because people right now need that money.
Yeah, and I do want to say, just as a side note, it kind of cracks me up now, but when I was a kid, it's funny the stuff that you hear that, when you're a little kid, but every time they were singing Marley and Marley, which makes sense because they're the Marley brothers. For some reason, when I was a kid, I always heard it as Marley and Barley. I don't know why, but yeah, that's just thing about being the kid listening to songs. But I do want to take a moment to recognize, obviously all the great songs in this movie, but also the score by Miles Goodman, because it's really it tugs at the heartstrings. And Cliff, you talked about that opening shot with the credits, and you've got the overture playing over all that, which gives you kind of a preview of all the music that's going to be through the film. And whenever I start the movie and that music starts up, I'm like, it's Christmas. I feel now, so.
It is wildly colorful orchestration as the camera takes this ponderous, practical long shot over the rooftops of London, and the music and its overture gets building and building, and you're like, it's coming, and all of a sudden, there's gonna be Muppets, and it just gets better and better as you go. There's something really smart about Brian's choice. He was taking maybe a tip of the hat from the way Disney would have a flyover the London rooftops. Not like the very opening of 101 Dalmatians is exactly the same as the opening of Peter Pan. And those movies were a couple of decades apart, but you have this wonderful motif of flying over the rooftops of London, like storybook style. And Brian Henson is bringing it classic. It's really in classic. That he uses this visual motif, and there's no CGI at that time. It's the early 90s, and so can you imagine the size of the set that they built? It was like, think about Peter Jackson and his bigatures for the Lord of the Rings. They were miniatures that were so huge they fit inside a bloody airplane hangar, but they were still miniatures. But you would stage something that large and have a camera, a small enough camera rig on a crane, go way over that practical rooftop that you built and let it take as long as you want. And at the time they were shooting it, they didn't know what the score was going to sound like. You know, the score and the songs were not complete. It was an act of faith to do this interesting opening long shot. And I need to shut up about it because I'm going on and on. But it's
cool. Actually, this is something we talked about in our Nightmare Before Christmas stream with Steven over at Here Be Dragons and Christina, Lady Triple, and that the 90s were a time where you did these kinds of things, and now you just CGI them, and you kind of, there's something special about the kind of the labor that is put into that, and what's produced is, I mean, I'm a 90s kid, so of course I'm like, it's never going to be like the 90s again, but it really isn't, because now you just have someone at their computer doing it up. There's some kind of artistry that goes into these kinds of movies that I think, I sound crotchety, but is lost now, right?
Yeah, trust me, Andy, you're not going to be the one that sounds old and crotchety on this stream. I'm just saying that. But I will say for that opening sequence, wait, who's that?
Yeah, who is this weirdo?
But for that opening shot, like they had to like push in the buildings right before the camera passed by them because they had to keep those out of the way until the camera had pulled back to a certain amount. So it's like the hard work involved in timing everything perfectly is astounding.
And if you watch the kind of the making of the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, you also see that kind of the labor that's put into it, which is why one of the reasons I love it so much is you still have that same work, you know, that labor of love. And you really feel that with the Muppet Christmas Carol as well.
It has slight echoes of that long opening shot of Beetlejuice over the model of the town, the scale model of the town.
Yes, it does. I love Beetlejuice. It's very it's oh gosh. I feel Jenna's screaming at me. Who is the director that does the creator? Tim Burton. Jeez, that's very Tim Burton.
Oh my God, Amy.
Yes. Jenna just canceled me. I'm sorry. I love you, Jenna. she's my best friend, and she's a huge Tim Burton fan. So
there's also something about the practical effects in the way they shot The Ghost of Christmas Past, which I believe was one of the Muppets shot in a water tank, to give the fluid motion of the robes, the sinuous, flowing, ethereal quality. I believe those were underwater shots of a puppeteer who was removed by optical effects in a water tank. Otherwise, I can't explain how they got the costuming to look like that.
That's how they did it. As a matter of fact, for the first scene, it's the Ghost of Christmas Past. For the first scene, they actually shot the puppets in baby oil, but for some reason they couldn't keep that going, so they had to move on to water. But what happens is if you watch that puppet throughout the course of the film, the robes look more and more decayed. That's because when you keep something underwater like that, it's eventually going to not be in as great condition as they go on. They get away with it because it continues to look great, but that's an interesting little bit that you can look out for if you're watching the movie.
And I know that the Ghost of Christmas Future is supposed to be the scary one, like it's a hooded figure with no face, but the Ghost of Christmas Past freaked me out as a kid. I was like, oh, what is that thing? It's like this little child face. It looked like one of those like China dolls things that like your grandma collects that like the eyes follow you as you walk through the room. It scared me. Even now, I was like, I won't be scared of this. I'm an adult. And I was like, oh God. It really, like, I know that the Ghost of Christmas Future is supposed to be the scary one, but they kind of toned that down a little bit. But the Ghost of Christmas Past is like, I am a child. And I'm like, no, you're a nightmare. It's really scary. a little bit
uncanny valley going on there, a bit.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing is that I think they meant it to kind of be cute. Like, I don't know, but it was really creepy. And I thought it wouldn't scare me, but it did.
Steven, stop trolling us, please. No, and actually, it's funny because I know I can't be the only one thinking this, but like nowadays, the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come looks like the Muppet version of the Ring Wraiths.
He does. Yeah, I do see a little bit of early Nazgul design there. I never thought of that. John, you hit it. That was really awesome what Amy just said about her. I also love the Ghost of Christmas Present, which may have had multiple people inside the suit to make it work, or it may have been mostly just one performer. But yes, he's basically, Charles Dickens' Gimli. He's very much a bright, happy Gimli the dwarf character for the Ghost of Christmas Present. He's really, really wonderful.
Amy and I keep trying to pop up the same.
Okay, I'm doing it. Okay. We kept trying to pop it up at the same time, so I would show and then he would hi, show and hi. You shouldn't have let me use the StreamYard account, John. Now it's just going to be this all the time.
I love it. That's great.
And the Ghost of Christmas Present is basically like the sort of representation of Santa Claus almost, except he has red hair instead of white hair. But there's no question for me that his song, which now when we've been talking about the movie, now I'm drawing a blank on the names of the songs. You got Cliff, you can help me out on that one.
Right. Let's see.
Are you talking about the Ghost of Christmas Present song?
Yeah.
I love that. So that's actually my favorite.
Well, let's see. The soundtrack.
I'm trying to pull up the list of songs, but for some reason,
I like that. Also, the Ghost of Christmas Present kept that kind of jovial.
It feels like Christmas.
It feels like
is what it's called. And I just love that song. It just fills me with all those Christmas feels.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's the one we're talking about. Guilty. Yeah.
Shot at Shepperton Studios, England.
Yeah, and I guess at a certain point we just have to gush about all the songs, but that's just the one that I love. All those moments where you can see Scrooge has just gone through that emotional experience of seeing Belle and sort of, it's that's the moment that sort of pierces his heart and opens him up to feeling things again. And then the song, It Feels Like Christmas, is just him learning to sort of embrace his humanity again. And I love those little moments, like when, he's looking through and seeing, the mice are happy and stuff. And he has that little smile on his face that shows it's getting through to him. And then as he's watching everybody dancing, he's sort of looking around in wonder. It's just, it's so emotional. It's
I also
great.
like the Ghost of Christmas Present, his message of get to know someone better, right? Get to actually know someone. And then he goes on to know the Cratchit family. And I think that's really sweet as a message is, these people have been working for you for years. Get to know them.
Yeah, I have to ask you though, Cliff, what's your favorite song in the film?
The opening number. Number.
Scrooge.
What's it called? Isn't there a list of the name of the songs somewhere in front of me?
I can pull it up because I just realized I own the soundtrack, so it's like.
Well, mine was I thought the Feels Like Christmas, but now I watched that deleted scene where Belle sings When Love Is Gone. So I don't know. I'm having an internal battle right now between those two songs.
Yeah, that opening number is just called Scrooge.
Okay.
It's the way it's introduced with Gonzo or Charles Dickens saying you will meet him as he comes around that corner. Where? There. When? Now. and then the music just comes in, and I just love the way everybody's involved in the song, and it just paints this portrait of this grouchy, unfeeling guy. And And I love when the chorus is singing, "He must be so lonely, he must be so," it said, "There must be a sweet man inside," and then they're all like, nah.
And it also kind of introduces you to this to this part of London and kind of all of the different types of people and Muppets, right, that are there. And it's just a really nice kind of opening scene. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the opening song in Beauty and the Beast, Belle, where she's going through the village and seeing all these different people, kind of introducing you to the general kind of feeling of this neighborhood.
Yeah, definitely. I love it. It's really classic. And Amy, I loved your point that you made a moment ago about the Ghost of Christmas Present encouraging Ebenezer to have a relationship with the Cratchit family, encouraging him to have, in the story, to have a relationship with his own nephew, with his own family, and going to their house. And the very striking thing, the difference between the book and the way the Muppet Christmas Carol, they do not introduce the starving children who are underneath the robes of the Ghost of Christmas Present. They're just not in this movie. The Muppets don't have them. Well, they appear in the book and in other adaptations, and they're really, really super creepy and out of control in the Bob Zemeckis version, where a lot of things are out of control in that version. But, hey, I like it anyways. But the very last thing, in connection with your observation, Amy, the very last bit of dialogue said by the Ghost of Christmas Present, and he doesn't dissolve into a corpse, into a skeleton, and then dissolve into dust. He sprinkles away in floating rainbow starlets of little rainbow sprinkles, and he fades away as gently as Jen's master fades away in the opening scene of The Dark Crystal. Okay? And he says, "Go forth and know him better, man," telling Scrooge to go and know the next spirit of Christmas is yet to come. And it ties in so thematically. There's some level of intelligence going on in this adaptation with what they decided to cut, what they judiciously decided to alter from the original story. They don't have Ebenezer taking pennies off of the dead body of his business partner to save money. Zemeckis has that. I think Alistair Sim might do that in the classic version that he's in. But the Muppets decide to make their cuts and trims. But even better, they decide to sew the thematic material and strengthen it with the constant use of Gonzo, and like you just observed, with that kind of that thematic power of Ebenezer learning to think of other people outside of himself. Finally, a breakthrough for this character to go and learn about other people outside of his own miserable self. It's the key to everything. And I really like the overall gentleness that they have here in the Muppet Christmas Carol. It's really lovely, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's so good. And I'm just now thinking of, you mentioned Gonzo again, but I'm thinking of that great dynamic between him and Rizzo throughout the film, and it just adds like this little side story to the main story. And I love moments like when in the beginning of the film when Gonzo is telling about Ebenezer, and then he's starts to look in the window and he's like, man, this really is a dirty city. And then he takes Rizzo and just starts using him to wipe down the mirror, and Rizzo says, "Thank you for making me a part of this."
My favorite Rizzo moment is when he is jumping down from the gate and then he goes, "Oh, I forgot my jelly beans." And he goes back between the bars and then comes back. And then Gonzo's like, "You could have fit through the bars this whole time." And the fact that he keeps losing his jelly beans. And then one time he goes, "They were in my pocket the whole time." It's so cute. It's so endearing. And you're following the main story, but adding Gonzo and Rizzo, I think, kind of adds this kind of extra fourth wall breaking, hey kids, let's go back to the story, and my favorite part too, other than the one where he goes back to get his jelly beans, is what John had mentioned earlier earlier where he goes, we're just gonna, this is the scary part. We'll see you guys at the finale. It was just they're kind of, holding your hand through the story. But then also when it's too much for them, good luck to you. We're out.
And it adds dramatic gravitas to that last part. It's like, especially for the kids, you don't have that safety net of your sort of comic narrators. It's like, this is the part where you're on your own. And yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's great. But, the mortar between the bricks, essentially, to me, the mortar between all the bricks is how invested Michael Caine is.
Yeah.
That unfortunately cut musical number, that song, sees him relate to other human beings in a way that is so deeply, deeply human, because he brings that same energy to the way he serves dinner to the Cratchits, the way he has Tiny Tim on his shoulder, the way that Michael Caine invests the same look in his eyes and the same tears in his eyes, the same spirit that he'll give to these characters of felt and foam and fabric, the way he would give, to the ghost of a woman he loved. It's really good stuff from him.
And I would be, easily tempted to say that moment is one of his strongest performances ever, because just the way he sort of breaks down in emotion, and you can see it in his eyes and the tears. And like, when I see that scene, I'm just an emotional wreck. It's
the scene where he's at his headstone and he's and then all of a sudden he's back in the bed and he falls on the bed. And when he lifts his head slightly, you can see the emotion that he puts in his eyes is really, it tells half the story in itself. You don't even need the dialogue to see that he's been affected by the lessons of all three of these ghosts. And also, I'm sorry, I forgot one more Gonzo and Rizzo moment is when they keep getting knocked out because of opening the window. And the one time and they're like, hey, do you think it's safe now? And he's like, yeah, the story's basically over.
Yeah, it's Scrooge is saved. What could happen now?
Yeah.
Right. Really good, man. They love a good gag. They do it well. They do it really well.
And something that made go kind of unnoticed in the larger scheme of all the characters is the little bunny Muppet that that is the carol singer, and he just wants a little money, and Scrooge hurls the wreath at him. And then there's a moment later on after at nighttime, after Bob Cratchit and the bookkeepers, who, by the way, I love the bookkeepers. When they walk away, and you just see the little bunny just sort of shivering, it adds this is what Scrooge's sort of way of life and what he's been doing is doing to these less fortunate people, and it's a real moment, and so it comes back with the joy of when he tries to correct that at the end of the film, and you have that character be the one who goes to get the turkey, and and is part of the whole celebration. So and Giu was just talking about that with getting the turkey, and I think that also shows you have kind of three different Christmases. You have Scrooge very comfortable in his bed, and then you have the Cratchits, who are kind of lower middle class, who they don't have much, but they really do have love. And, Miss Piggy, Mrs. Cratchit puts together this wonderful meal, and, they're all together. And then you have, the homeless, basically, who for them, Christmas is just another night that they could freeze to death. I'm sorry to bring it down. I know this is a Muppets movie, but it has actually some kind of socioeconomic commentary kind of weaved into this kids movie. Well, bye, Stephen. Thanks for coming by. And yeah, I mentioned them in passing, but also the bookkeepers. Just, there's a moment that should be completely over the top, but it's it's a Muppet movie, and I love it. Is when they're asking for more coal for the fire, and the Scrooge is like, how would they like to be suddenly unemployed? And then it cuts back to them, and they're on tropical outfits, and they're going, heat wave, this is my island in the sun. It's great.
I love when they come to ask him for Christmas off, and at first they think, oh yeah, we get the full day off, and then Scrooge is kind of like, and then they kind of put it on Kermit, and they're like, it was his idea.
There's some choice casting in this film. I don't know if everything that happened in Muppets Treasure Island was a home run in relation to how certain characters get to be played by certain Muppets, but in this movie, they really got the best mileage out of Fozzie the Bear as Fezziwig, and Statler and Waldorf becoming not one, but two, floating Marleys. And then, of course, the Cratchit family interspersed between pigs and frogs. It's almost perfect. And, Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker as the charity bookkeepers, they're great moments of casting. But I don't know. I mean, I just think it's fantastic that they decided against the original plan, which was to have familiar Muppet characters play the three Christmas spirits. And then they changed that and decided to make all new designs for the three Christmas spirits.
I think that was very
relegated other Muppet characters to be other characters from the book. I think that was a really smart move, really.
I think so too. Yeah, because it wasn't really distracting the way it was with having, Kermit and Miss Piggy as the Cratchits, but I think that would have kind of, you were so often going, oh, look, it's it's that Muppet playing that. And I think it would have taken away from the spirits being foreign, to the viewer and kind of outside and different. And I think that them being new designs for the movie, I think really was the best choice.
Yeah, I do love, talking about the scene with, I don't know all the Muppets names, sadly. Beaker, and who's the other one?
That's Dr. Bunsen Honeydew from Muppet Labs.
It's like, that's a key example of when the two of them are playing those characters, and, how Michael Caine is playing it completely straight, and just talking to them about, sending the poor to the prison houses and, all this stuff, as though, he were acting alongside, human beings. And, it's just, I'm constantly in awe of everything that Michael Caine puts into this performance.
Yeah, me too. It's great stuff.
But I actually want to pause here because we're about halfway through. So I'm going to do the mid-roll, and Cliff and Amy.
And if it's your first time watching, we're not done. This is the mid-roll. It happens in, mid. We have more talk after this. This is just us plugging a couple things, and then we
when we did our Lord of the Rings, when we did our first Lord of the Rings stream, we had some people who got ready to leave, and it's like, no, we're not done yet. But we just want to talk about what's coming up next week. We're going to be doing a review of Wonder Woman 1984, and I know we are confirmed to have Helen the Clueless Fangirl is going to be joining us. And I think we have another guest lined up. I don't know if she's confirmed yet, but stay tuned for that announcement. And then the week after that, we are going to be doing A Dangerous Method. It'll be the return of the Knights of Kira. So join Amy and me as well as Jared, and we're going to be doing a great conversation about that film. Amy, what's coming up on your channel?
Throw that up there too. If you love Kira as much as we do, we're all over social media, so please check us out. So I'm done for December on my channel. Obviously, it's the holidays. But I am going to be doing a lot of stuff come 2020, more Song of Ice and Fire and his Dark Materials analysis, and I'm going to do The Witcher. Avatar: Last Airbender and the Poppy War. So I have a lot coming up, and I'm also going to continue with Buddy Banter. If you please watch on my channel, I had a great stream with John over here.
Yeah, guys.
First episode of Buddy Banter, where I have a friend on the channel and we talk about whatever they want to talk about. And John picked a great topic for the first episode.
Yeah, and actually, it's I have a link to it on our channel here. So just scroll down to guest appearances and you'll see it right there. Please, guys, watch this. It was a really personal stream. We had a great time talking about this. It's all about, our sort of how our gender influences the types of movies and television we watch. Hasn't gotten a whole lot of views yet. I want to see that number go up. So please go watch that, guys, and share it with others if you can. But
yes,
yeah,
we had a really good time, and I also just dropped a video discussion about Cersei that is now my second most watched video, and I think it's because Rohan, my guest, does some really, really nuanced analysis of her character, and I really, really appreciate that. And I also had Lo the Links on to talk about Lyso No Mar, so please check that out if you're a Song of Ice and Fire fan. But if you're a fan of any of the other things I mentioned, please give me a sub and hit that little bell, and you'll know when I'm going live or when I have uploaded a video.
And also over on the other channel on which I'm a co-host, Here Be Dragons, tomorrow at 6 o'clock, we will be talking about the last 3 episodes of The Mandalorian Season 2, where, you may have heard some big stuff may have happened. So please check that out as well. And Cliff, you always have stuff going on, but especially right now, there's some streams going on that people might want to pay attention to.
Yes, very recently over at theonering.net, we decided to do a special Christmas recording for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day with the estimable Doug Adams, who worked hand in hand with Howard Shore for many years during the recording sessions of all the music for the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogies, each together. And he's the author of the book, The Music of the Lord of the Rings Films. So author Doug Adams, with his co-author Jim J. Ware, who's working with him on the music of the Hobbit trilogy, they're with us having a wonderful conversation, talking about the efforts of music and the efforts of storytelling that find a unique marriage, an unbelievable synthesis of visual and musical art with Peter Jackson and Howard Shore working together at the height of their creative powers. So that's the deep dive. We've got those available on our YouTube channel on archive. They were just streamed yesterday for part 1 of the Fellowship of the Ring and part 2 of the Fellowship of the Ring. And I think starting tomorrow, God willing and the creek don't rise, we're going to have more additional streams for the next versions of the Two Towers and the Return of the King as we deep dive further into the music of the Howard Shore scores. So come along, everybody come along and gather around the campfire. It's kind of fun because we're doing active watch-alongs of the movies themselves. It's not just a, partial discussion of things after the fact. We have a countdown clock so you can watch on the timer and you can actually watch the film at home along with us while we examine the score live.
Yeah, and everybody, I just dropped a link to the first part of that in the chat. So please go check that out. And yeah, I mean, Doug is just great. I had the pleasure of having him on this channel for an interview where we talked for 3 hours about all the music of Lord of the Rings. And so if any of you haven't heard that, obviously go ahead and check that out on this channel. But especially for a live commentary of those films, like I said, I got to start watching the first little bit of the first part that you guys did, and it's just a joy to listen to. Like I'm making sure that I actually save that to like my hard drives, because that is like going to be like, you have the 4 commentary tracks on the DVDs and Blu-rays, and this is just getting added onto that because it's right. Just a fantastic discussion. Mate.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of joy in listening to someone as erudite as Doug and Jim talk about, the instrumentation and talk about the work that Howard put into making those scores. It's really great stuff. And I'm very privileged. They make my job easy. They're the geniuses. I just let them talk and let them mute. But you can't get through a conversation without saying, "Wow, Gandalf never had a theme for Gandalf in all of the Lord of the Rings movies. He got one years later in the Hobbit movies. There's actually a Gandalf theme, and when I hear it now, I hear it in the distance. It snaps, and I'm like, I hear it as distinctly as I hear Ray's theme from John Williams, or Leia's theme. I hear it, and I'm like, that's Gandalf's theme, but it does not exist in the Lord of the Rings films. So suddenly I'm at this real granular level of knowing more about the music than I ever knew before, thanks to having these wonderful people guest on the live stream with me. So it is a treat. It's really lovely.
It was one of the most pleasurable and also easiest experiences of my life, because all you really have to do with Doug is sort of start off a conversation about one of the pieces, and he will take it and run with it. He is just a glorious interview. So honestly, you guys should listen to anything and everything you can get a hold of with that man. And I'm very much looking forward to finishing up that listen, because it's great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And so do you have anything else that you're working on that you want to plug, Cliff?
Well, just stay tuned, because we've got surprises at theonering.net, and I can't say more. We have some eye-opening surprises coming up. That's all I gotta say.
Ooh,
oh my God,
that's exciting.
So yeah, that's all I gotta say.
Excellent.
I have one more thing, by the way. I'm sorry, John.
Yep, go ahead.
December 30th, there is a wonderful little thing over on Nessie's channel, The Unspun Yarn, and it's called Bleep the Patriarchy, where we do some feminist analysis. In our first episode was about the first female VP, Kamala Harris, and this December 30th at 3 p.m. Eastern, we're going live on The Unspun Yarn for the second episode of Bleep the Patriarchy with Ian Thomas Malone and Lo the Links. And we are going to talk about transphobia and turfism. So come over and rip on J.K. Rowling with us. It'll be fun.
Yeah, and I just want to say bye to Cassie, reflective rambling. She has to head out. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Bye. Please join the Slack.
Yes.
We enjoy having you every time.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if any of you are new and you are interested in joining the Here Be Dragons Slack, which is basically, all the communities of both of the Here Be Dragons, John Webster Film, and Nessie's The Unspun Yarn, just email we3dragons@gmail.com and we'll get you set up. Okay, so let's dive back into the Muppet Christmas Carol. I don't remember where we left off, but
nice. Second half of the stream, and he gets to change hats. I don't know where we left off, but something I thought I would really like to talk about is kind of the Cratchit family as a whole, and kind of the dynamics and kind of what is, what the filmmakers are doing with that, what Dickens was doing with that, and all of that. Because I think my favorite scene is whenever they're about to have Christmas dinner, and Kermit, Mr. Cratchit, right, says, "Oh, we need to, thank Scrooge." And you can see Miss Piggy, Mrs. Cratchit, be like, "I'm the one who was cooking all day," right? What are you talking about? So I kind of like the sassiness of his wife. And that's, of course, a huge, Miss Piggy thing. She's a great sassy pig. But I did kind of like that dynamic, in that Mr. Cratchit is not treated well by Scrooge, and yet he is still thankful for his employment. And I find that really endearing to his character.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree. Yeah. There's an entry point for Kermit the Frog, and that's basically Kermit the Frog. He always was the everyman, and that's why it's so smart to place him into that position as Bob Cratchit, because that's the entry point for someone in the story who is thanking I'm just a working class guy who's struggling to feed my family and keep things going, you know? He's the Samwise Gamgee of A Christmas Carol, is Bob Cratchit.
Yeah, and on a sort of on a sort of technical note about the introduction of his character, and it goes with this whole idea of these are the characters in a Christmas Carol rather than like being introduced as, oh, this Muppet is entering the story. You hear Scrooge say Bob Cratchit before you see Kermit the Frog. So it sets him up as that character before he even appears on screen. And I like that touch. But yeah, there's just something really comforting about having Kermit in that role, because it is really perfect for him. But yeah, and I love.
And then of course there's Tiny Tim, who just tugs at your heartstrings. Like, his role in this story is to make you cry. I'm convinced of that. But he's that example of the the innocence, right, of children, and also kind of the unfairness that he was born into a family that they care for him so much, but because they are poorer, they can't get him the help that he needs, and yet they it hurts so much, they want to take care of him, and he's just a freaking nice kid, right? Like, when we first get him, he's on his dad's kind of carrying him on his shoulder, and then Kermit's, I'm sorry, I'm just going to use their puppet name. Kermit talks to Miss Piggy, and says, oh, he said he wanted to go to church, and so that they'd remember him. And I'm just like, oh my God, the tears, I can't hold them back. Like, he seems like such a sweet kid. And he obviously is the first to really gain Scrooge's sympathies. He's kind of the first character for Scrooge to go, wait a second, he sees all these less fortunate characters, but it's not until we get to Tiny Tim that he really has that turn of caring for the poor.
True. It is the ghost of Christmas Present, who is quickly fading away and quickly aging. And Ebenezer remarks with some surprise, can you do nothing to slow down time? Must a spirit pass so fast? And it's at that point in the conversation where Scrooge is also told about Tiny Tim not being there, and that is the spirit says to him, I see an empty chair in the future, and a crutch gently laid over by the fireplace, and that's when Ebenezer does show another glimpse, the strongest glimpse of something within him. You're right, it's totally there.
Yeah, where he also acknowledges in that moment, I pay Bob such a small salary, and he's starting to acknowledge his shortcomings and his failings. And it's just beautiful to see that sort of step-by-step progression.
How did this movie not make more money at the box office? Because it was not huge. It made twice its money back in production cost to its budget, but it was not a runaway hit like they were hoping to get. Mm-hmm. But then years and years later, like any great adaptation of A Christmas Carol, it earns its status as a beloved classic. But I still haven't figured out why exactly it didn't make much more money when it was released at the time in the early 90s. Still haven't figured that out.
But wait, Cliff, are you implying that even with cutting out the scene that was going to bore audiences, that it didn't make $1 billion to $1 jillion?
I know. According to my research, it was out at the time frame when Disney's Aladdin was still in theaters, and Home Alone 2, the sequel, was gangbusters in the movies, and that was exactly the time when this film, Muppet Christmas Carol, was released, I believe on December 11th, barely 14 days ahead of the actual Christmas day.
Well, I was a 6-month-old, so sorry I couldn't make it. to the theaters.
No.
My
Yes,
mom
we know,
bought the
Amy.
VHS for me, so got a little bit of money there.
But it is interesting because like I don't remember a time when that VHS tape wasn't like an important like touchstone in my sort of household and popping it in the machine every Christmas. And to be clear, there was sort of a gap as I started to get older that I didn't watch it. But then it's funny, you have like your sort of obsession with these childhood classics when you're younger, and I unless you're a big Henson fan, maybe like our esteemed guest, but for me, I know I went through a phase where I probably didn't watch it for a number of years, but then you start to grow up and you rediscover the joy of these types of films, and ever since then it's once again become a staple of my Christmas viewing.
Mm-hmm. That's weird to me that the movie opened in 6th place. When it was released in 1992, it only earned $6 million its opening weekend, and it opened in 6th place. It couldn't compete with Aladdin, which was gangbusters at the time, which is weird why Disney released its own movie against itself. Weird, but whatever. But here's the thing. There's certain movies where it really doesn't matter in the long run, like The Dark Crystal itself, which made fair to middling box office returns, but nothing spectacular. And it was considered a failure to its overall cost. But then years later, it becomes so fiercely beloved, and then the studio re-releases it, and they may make money hand over fist with, and I'm telling you, they earn their stripes. There's some of the Jim Henson works, like Emmett Otter's Jug Band's Christmas. They earn their stripes over time. We go back and look at how beloved and wonderful it was, and stop and think, why didn't we love it this much the first time? And I'm usually the first person in the room to say, well, lovelies, I was there in the room the first time. I was. That's because I'm the senior member here, and I was definitely there at the time. I'm old enough to have bloody well been there. But it is weird to me that some Christmas things come out like instant classics, like A Nightmare Before Christmas was an instant sensation. And it was out in theaters for months and months, and then it was re-released at Christmas again. But some movies just earn their stripes later on when the audience gathers later and starts to love it, and it becomes a thing. Maybe Muppet Christmas Carol is one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, because it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's been a classic ever since it was on home video. So yeah, it's a shame that it didn't do, better in theaters, but you know what? It's time has been on its side. So
it kind of makes me think of Rocky Horror Picture Show, which makes more money when they release it now than when they first released it. And now people go in costume and it became a cult classic. But for some movies, it just kind of takes time. And then others are kind of, instantly already called a classic before they're even a year old, right? But yeah, I think that the thing about the Muppet Christmas Carol that I like a lot of things about it, but I think that it does kind of have that feel-good Christmas spirit of a good Christmas movie, Like my favorite Christmas movie is Elf. And I don't even think the main guy is that funny. I never like anything that he does. But I like Elf. I can't remember his name. It's not
Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell. I never think he's funny, but I love Elf, and I think that is the most hilarious movie. And
this is going to be a point of division between you and me.
Well, anyway. I won't out who I think is funny and who is not, because I'm going to alienate like half the chat either way. I don't think Jim Carrey's funny. I'm sorry, don't at me, chat. Anyway, but Will Ferrell. I know his face, but I never. There are these like Christmas movies that even if you don't even care for the actors anywhere else, you really like that. And so I think there could be some people out there that don't really know much about the Muppets or anything, but find this as a Christmas classic, And I think the reason that what's interesting is you're talking about Cliff, putting it up against Aladdin, I think that they thought, and it was an erroneous thinking, but I think they thought that, oh, well, Muppet Christmas Carol is a Christmas movie and Aladdin is like, a Disney princess movie, so they won't compete. But I think they kind of did. And they kind of set themselves up for one of those movies was going to suffer because of it. And it was, unfortunately, the Muppet Christmas Carol.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's amazing that there were bad decisions being made with regard to this movie, because that's not it's not like we've discussed that already or anything, but clearly, it's just unfortunate. But like I said, in the end, it doesn't really matter. And you talked about the fact that I'll take another digression into Dark Crystal again, but you talked about that also was considered a failure upon its immediate release, but time made it a classic, which makes it doubly frustrating that we're faced with the same sort of short-sighted thinking with Age of Resistance, where you don't get the results you're immediately looking for, and so you bail ship on it. Even though like one season of that show alone will still become a classic that stands next to the original film, and time will bear that out. Supremely
well said. Totally well said. The thing is, if you're a producer and you're thinking about your bottom line and how much money you're going to have to spend, it makes no sense, because the Age of Resistance would have been that much cheaper to make going forward, because the massive front end work was already done. You had so much work already done. The puppets are created, the large rooms that are used as modular platform pieces, they're all there. Everything's ready. And you're ready for season 2 and season 3. And the only money you need to spend is on the writer's room. At that point, you're ready to go.
I think it's another example of, unfortunately, capitalism getting in the way of art, worrying about the bottom line rather than the overall kind of, artistic production itself. And that, like we've been talking about, some things like wine need to age before, they kind of become popular. So sometimes you have to give some, a production time to mature and for people to discover it. And, don't get me started on Netflix.
And it was inevitable that we were going to keep dipping back into the Dark Crystal conversation. But I do want to say, like, if you're still mad about that, the thing to still do is, provided you still have Netflix, and I understand the anger of some people who maybe canceled Netflix, but if you still have it, watch the show. Just like keep going back and watching it, because those numbers show that there's still interest. And go back and watch Cliff's the stream that Cliff and I did. Also just for our talk about it, but also because there's some links in the description of that stream, because there are petitions that still should continue to be signed, and especially for petitions that are not even just about renewing the show, but also getting a Blu-ray release for the first season. And because we need that, because if we can just get that Blu-ray release, you can get even more people to have seen the show and to become fans of it. So yeah. So
I agree.
That's
in tandem with that, you if you align yourself with some of the other Dark Crystal content creators who are on Facebook and YouTube and other channels, they organize the Thraw-a-thon, which is usually on the anniversary date of the actual premiere of the Netflix series. So if you want to show Netflix how aggressive those numbers are, with all of us coming back to rewatch the series over and over again, it happens at these concentrated intervals where we would watch together, and then suddenly there it is. The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance appears nationwide as being in the top 10 trending on Netflix in the top 10. And so they're going to do that annually, and they're going to keep that up annually so that they get the message, really.
And I think they just had one of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, like I said, just keep going back and watching. If you love it, just keep showing your support.
Yeah, and it's also, Netflix is looking at the numbers, but it's also the kind of how much the fans invest in it as well. Like there can be some really, really dedicated fans to a certain, brand or franchise. And I think that also is important. How many times you hashtag Age of Resistance, right? How much talk there is about it and discourse on social media is also important because, lots and lots of people watch many things, but they're not talking about it actively. So I think that's also important.
Yeah, moving back over to the Muppet Christmas Carol, because I of course love any Dark Crystal discussion. I do also want to make sure we stay on topic. I want to talk in depth about that whole final sequence after Scrooge is, he goes through the experience of the Ghost of Christmas future and seeing his name on the gravestone and that's a really emotional scene as well, where he breaks down, starts talking about how he says he's not the man he was, and this is again Michael Caine just bringing it of not being afraid to tap into all these emotions and stuff. But when he comes out the other side of that, and the joy of his performance and how absolutely happy he is to now be able to change his life. It's one of the most joyous stretches of film for me ever, and it's the part that I love to get to when I watch this movie.
Me too. I noticed when I was rewatching both of these films recently, they don't spend enough time with Ebenezer after his metamorphosis. And it is so much better when they do, because some of these filmmakers just rush to the end and get to the end of the film and you're done. And you hardly get any much of a real sense of the newly redeemed Ebenezer Scrooge is a sight to behold. But here in our Muppet version, Michael Caine inhabits it so well. And not only do they spend more time with the character, but we get a whole extra musical number too, which is twice the gold, really. Yeah.
The music again. We could just go on and on and on about the music, and there's little moments throughout that song that I love. I love when he goes into, back into his business, and I love the irony of he's giving coal to the bookkeepers, which would normally associate with being you give that to the people who have been naughty, but it's that's exactly what they wanted for Christmas. So there's just that joy of the way he's filling out the little slips and just lightly putting them down. And you talking about something if you want to know your worth, you simply count your friends, and and the gesture that he makes there, and it's everything about that warms my heart.
Mm-hmm. But as a writer, if you're adapting Charles Dickens, it's public domain, anybody can adapt it. But if it's in your hands as a screenwriter, why would you give short shrift to that post-transformation of your main character? Why would you do that? It is way, way smarter, I think. Don't you think? You've worked so hard to develop this character to the point of him saying, I'm a changed man, and him seeing what the cost of his own soul is. It's so much better to spend a lot of time inhabiting this post-transformation. I don't understand why Bob Zemeckis barely spends 3 or 4 minutes with a rejuvenated Scrooge, and Jim Carrey is hopping around. He's giddy as a schoolboy, and he has a couple of funny bits, and then bam, the movie's over. I don't understand that.
Yeah, because it's a new beginning for Scrooge, and it's kind of like
Right.
a new chapter in his life. And so you've read all of these chapters to go get to the end, and then it's like you turn the page and it's just over suddenly. It feels incomplete without showing how the transformation has not just affected Scrooge, but those around him, right? Showing how surprised people are, and showing like his conversations with, hey, I'm gonna, he goes back to the people who were the Muppets that were coming to ask for donations, and he like whispers in their ear how much he's gonna do, and they're like, whoa, like these kinds of reactions from those around him, and also their initial kind of, their initial suspicion at first, kind of being like, yeah, you already told us yesterday, Scrooge, to not put you down for anything. He's like, no, not this time. I've got something for you, right? And then when he goes, and I love this scene when he goes and he gives a little bit of cheese with a bow around it to the mice, and they're all like, oh, like, wow, this is exactly what we wanted. It's so cute to see him spreading the Christmas cheer.
Which, by the way, jumping back to the very beginning of the film, that is, one of my favorite bits as well, where the mice are just like, please, sir, we want some cheese. But yeah, it's little moments like that are just, and but it's actually funny because you talk about that's taking its time, but they could arguably take even more time, but it is a Disney, the Henson Company movie, and and your audience is kids. So I think you need to ride that line between not giving it the short shift, but also maybe not dragging it out too much. But honestly, as a fan of this movie, I could have sat there and watched these scenes play out even longer, because you just sort of revel in the joy of a redeemed Scrooge and his sort of newfound relationships. And yeah, I don't see, I get that it's a thing with movies where you reach sort of the climax of, the plot part is done, so you want to roll the credits as quickly as possible. But Cliff, you and I know a little something about, the urge some people might have to, cut straight to the end, but the filmmaker's choice to give those characters the space to show their change. Was kind of the whole argument that was being had with the end of Return of the King and Lord of the Rings. That also is a story that allows you to see the transformations that have occurred with characters and how that story has affected them.
Here's the Return of the King. After the ring is destroyed. End of the movie. Fade to white. Nope. Come back. Ending number 2. Fade to white. Nope. Come back. Ending number 3. Fade to black. Nope. You're not done. There's a coronation. Next one. Fade to black again. Nope. Here comes ancient Bilbo. You're not done yet. And it keeps going. And you're like, I love that. I personally feel like I'm reading the book. That's the book. That's the experience. But when you're at the movie theater, everyone in the audience is going, SMH, smack my head, what? But what's really funny about Muppet Christmas Carol is using the playfulness of the song and some of the recitative in between the bits of the song. And thanks, Sontavia. Wonderful to have you with us on the show. Thank you.
Glad to have you, girl.
Great to have your wonderful observations too. Fabulous. The bit where he's standing at Bob Cratchit's door and said, well, I've had my fill of this, Bob Cratchit. And then Piggy storms around from behind the door as Mrs. Cratchit, and she's like, well, I've had my fill of you. And it is so good that not only are we getting transformed Ebenezer, who's post-metamorphosis, and I hate to sound like Franz Kafka when I say that, but come on, I love it. But we're getting more comedy bits from the Cratchits. We're getting more songs. We're getting a dinner with the family at the dinner table. And then at the very, very end, we lift up to these beautiful rooftops of London, and in voiceover, Rizzo says, that's a nice story. And you get this wonderful Charles Dickens as Gonzo saying, yeah, you like it? Well, then you should read the book. I love it. It is such a great, great ending, because I love it. I love this guy. they haven't lost sight of what they were doing from the very beginning, and it does stand out as one of the better adaptations. It really does. In the 1980s, Amy, I know, totally 90s kid, I love it, but I grew up in the 1980s watching George C. Scott as the Ebenezer Scrooge in a television version of A Christmas Carol that was really dark and atmospheric and really beautiful. It was really beautiful. And I watched it over and over again, and that was in the late 80s. And the only thing that took its place was this one with Michael Caine. And suddenly, there's your definitive, and everybody else likes to say, oh, well, Clifford, why don't you talk about Bill Murray? Isn't that your kid of the 80s? I'm like, yeah, I was a child of the 80s, but my ultimate Scrooge wasn't, Bill Murray. It was actually George C. Scott until Michael Caine came along, actually. But that's just me. I'm a child of my time, whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it does speak a lot that for so many people, the Muppet Christmas Carol is their definitive version, despite the fact that it's the Muppets. You wouldn't think that would be like the sort of the the holy grail of Christmas Carol adaptations, but it is because it's so well done, and again, what I was talking about before with the way they're able to integrate so much of the prose of Charles Dickens through Gonzo, and just the spirit of the story is there, and it's Michael Caine's performance, which just has, he puts so much into it. There's so much heart behind it, and it has those darker moments, but it's wonderfully balanced. It makes you feel good at the end of the film, and and the song comes back, it feels like Christmas, over the end credits, and it just like, it never fails to put this gigantic smile on my face. And yeah, so.
And I mean, I also think Tiny Tim is so freaking cute. I'm sorry, guys. I can't get over it, because in every version, of course, Tiny Tim is this little precious cinnamon bun, but to have him as a little frog, it's just so precious. It adds more to the cuteness, and you have these, a very protective mother and a kind father, and you have whenever Mr. Cratchit gets home and they all run to him and he's with Tiny Tim. It's just, they're a really precious family, and I think that they are kind of the center of a happy family that even though they don't have much, they still love each other. And I think that Scrooge really finds a lot of warmth and happiness there, because he does get to go and see his nephew and her wife, and they're playing games and they look like they're having fun, but they obviously have more. Their house is larger, right? They have a larger spread as far as dinner, but to see how the Cratchits, how they put their heart into everything, and particularly Tiny Tim, and with the classic God bless us everyone, it's just freaking precious. And I think that this Tiny Tim in particular really gets you, because he's even cuter as a little frog.
Played by Robin.
Yeah,
I believe that's Robin is Kermit's nephew, right? That is his name? Have I forgotten? I may have forgotten.
Yeah, I'm not sure. If you can't remember Cliff, I highly doubt that I would be able to.
My brain. But yeah, Amy is 1,000% right. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, totally. There's no easier way to sucker punch people than with a cute little baby frog. Then that's what they learned with the child. That's what they learned.
Yeah, and then
Yep.
when it's like when you come to the later scene and Kermit is, they say he's walking home a little slower these days, and Tiny Tim has passed away. It's like the waterworks just come, like,
I know.
It's,
I know.
well, even though okay, because everybody knows A Christmas Carol, so it's going to be okay in the end, but like it still just tears you up inside. Yeah.
Yeah, and you also have, I love this scene with Rizzo coming down, and he's on, they're turning the goose to make sure it gets, cooked through. and not burned on one side or anything. And he's like, ha ha ha, and he's doing that dance. And then it was just really funny when Gonzo comes down. He goes, man, I miss all the fun. And then Rizzo looks at his feet and they're still smoking. And he's like, what are you talking about?
That's awesome.
Yeah, I can't stress enough like how much the two of them add to this, because as we've been saying, like it's a nice, sort of side relationship to all the events of the story, but it just allows the audience, again, moments of reprieve if the story is maybe getting a little too dark for kids in the audience. They it's Gonzo and Rizzo kind of make it okay, but then as we said before, when they leave, that adds an edge to the story, because you have to, and then they show up again, they're like, we're back, we promised we would be. Yeah, it's just adorable.
Yeah, it's super good. So there's a lot to love with any argument about movies or movie history. Everyone's going to go back and talk about the Alistair Sim classic from the way back when, and I appreciate that we have those in our audience watching the show tonight who are on that bandwagon. But I think it's fair that any good movie history conversation could put Michael Caine toe to toe with Alistair Sim any day. But we'll leave that for the scholars to decide. We'll leave that for other greater minds to wield in the future. But I can see like the way that we talk about Plato nowadays. Imagine centuries from now, people picking apart the difference between the Alistair Sim and the Michael Caine and the Jim Carrey and the George C. Scott, all the different Scrooges. I can see people still battling out which Scrooge was the best, because there's and this is without a doubt always in the top. The Muppet Christmas Carol is always in the top. Always. And I'm willing to fight on that hill. Fight, and I'm going to stand on that hill.
I'm there in support with
Cliff
you.
has his hill ready. We're all there to die on it with him.
Seriously.
I do want to talk a little bit about, and you addressed this, a bit off the top of the stream, but what do you think this film means in sort of the history of the Henson Company?
Well, it's stands in a very peculiar place, because it was the first time they were trying to do something without Jim, in a feature film. Not to say that they had done other television projects, but this is the first time that they really dared to bring back the Muppets brand to a feature film after Jim's death. And so there was a lot riding on it for the family and for people, within the world of puppetry, and for, some of the dearly beloved Muppet performers like Dave Goelz, and Frank Oz and Steve Whitmire. It really is, it stands as a great success, because it was the first time they were trying to do it without Jim, and it came out beautifully. So I think it stands the test of time. But I can't imagine what the case was like with their nerves and what kind of unique anxieties they had at the time. I just can't imagine.
Yeah, it's because obviously me being a kid when it came out, like I wasn't thinking about all that stuff. But it must have been enormous pressure, especially for Brian Henson. And I imagine he felt a great deal of relief when it all worked out. But
I think what I like about this movie is it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like it's just being itself, It's obviously, the Muppets brand, but it's not trying to necessarily like it stands alone, And I think that it really does feel like a natural movie. And if you go in watching it without this, knowledge of kind of the legacy it was working with, especially if you didn't know that, then I think it doesn't feel like a movie that was rushed. That feels like a lot of care was put into it, and it feels like it was it's a standalone Christmas movie that has its own merits, that happens to be a Muppet movie, rather than a Muppet movie that happens to be a Christmas movie.
Yeah, and we haven't addressed this throughout, but I just want to say again, like, I think this is different from other Muppet films in the fact that so much of it is played straight as it's an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. You don't have like the humans coming on and the human members of the cast coming on and sort of winking to the audience. It's all the emotion and the integrity of the story is all played for real. And I think that's what makes this not just a really special version of A Christmas Carol, but very special amongst the Muppet films.
I would agree with that. I totally agree with that. Look at the difference between Muppet Treasure Island and Muppet Christmas Carol, where, with Tim Curry and everybody on Muppet Treasure Island was more interested in playing fast and loose with R.L. Stevenson, really. That a lot more of that spirit of fun and playfulness. There's a different inhabiting, I know that sounds strange to say, but there's a different inhabiting spirit to their Christmas Carol project. You'll have to forgive me for lack of better words, but yeah, there's something better about it.
Yeah.
No, that's well said. I can feel that.
Yeah, definitely. Now we're winding down on time. I wanted to cheat just a little bit here, and we already did that to a certain degree by talking about Dark Crystal, but that was still, in the realm of the Henson Company. But Cliff, a lot of people know you obviously from your work on the OneRing.net, so I think I'll be forgiven for talking a little rings with you here at the end.
Sure.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about when we were supposed to have you on last week was when Return of the King won all those Oscars in 2004, you guys had the OneRing.net Oscar party, which famously the cast and crew of The Lord of the Rings, for lack of a better term, ditched the studio parties and came, to your guys' party. I just want to turn it over to you.
Three years in a row, we had 3 Oscar parties in a row. Yeah, actually, it was crazy.
But what was that night like? Because I wasn't fortunate enough to be there, so I'm just interested. What was that like from your perspective?
Well, on the final night for the Return of the King Oscar party, we were yes, I think guilty Undertaker, you're onto something. The world is very much ready for Muppets Lord of the Rings, but it would probably have to be a little half-hour special, because I don't think we could do a massive 9-hour and 45-minute jaunt. But the thing is, with our presence to do an event, it was for the fans to feel like they could go to a big black tie affair and have cocktail gowns and an elegant updo and rent a tux and have a big night out for celebrating the Oscars. But it was all about celebrating your favorite sword and sorcery film, really. We didn't know that they were going to win 11 out of 11 awards, but we very carefully produced the party at a physical space which was 1 block away up from the back door of the Kodak Theater, so that if the filmmakers wanted to come and acknowledge the fans, they could come by, and they easily did. And they brought, the only people who did not come were Annie Lennox and Kate Blanchett. They were the only 2 people who were not there. Everybody else, from Ian McKellen to Elijah Wood to Viggo Mortensen to the comic, the costume designers, the prop art department people, Sir Richard Taylor and the people from Weta, and all the visual effects guys, and Jim Rigel, the visual effects director, they were all there. But it was just, to be at that party, at that event, was a very strange intersection, an intersection of an audience and a bunch of New Zealand filmmakers who fancied themselves Lord of the Rings fans, which they were, and they had been isolated on this tiny little island production far away from the usual mechanisms at play in Hollywood. There were no studios, and they were way, way down there, separated from everyone. So when they came to the party and heard the sound of all the Wondering.net fans screaming and applaud for them as they came out with all of their Oscars on stage, and I was the master of ceremonies, and I had to do a lot of costume changes myself that night, and I brought them all out on stage, and it was just thunder. It was like thunder from the heavens. The filmmakers, yes, Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens and Peter Jackson were there, along with their editors and their costumers and their visual effects people and all their actors, and they were all there. But they didn't feel so isolated anymore. And for the crew, for the Kiwis, especially, you're talking about the people who had to do the carpentry work and the latex noses and the wigs, and the guy who designed the swords. They were up there in the middle of this thunder, and for the first time, they really, really understood how much energy the fan base had been putting into it, and it was a reciprocation that was long overdue. It was absolute magic, just for the filmmakers to feel that they got the chance to hear it and see it firsthand from the fandom that was really vocal in supporting them so much. So after they got the big glow of surprise, you won the Oscars, then they got to come a block over to see all of us fans screaming at them, surprise, these people love you. So it was just icing on the cake, I'm sure, for them.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen video and pictures of that night, and it just looked absolutely insane. I remember,
oh my God,
as the awards were actually happening, I have a vivid memory of me just sitting on my couch and jumping out of my seat every time they won something. But to actually be there and to be able to celebrate, that with all the fans and having them come along. There's this great picture that I used to use as my signature for a long time, where it's all of them up on stage holding up their Oscars, and all the fans have their arms up and stuff like it's a Beatles concert or something. And, it just must have been the best thing in the world.
Also, just thinking about being at a party, being able to hug people and be right next to them is really making me sad right now too.
I know, right?
Yeah, I miss parties.
It was wild. God, me too. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, as we're all in our little corner of this community, we've all just been thinking about it as soon as all this is over, thinking about the first convention, the first get together we all get to have. We're just all going to get together and hug.
It's just going to be a pile of hugging. Yeah. No, and I don't mean to go off on 2020, but it's about to be 2021, so I'm being reflective. But I just hope that we'll be able to get back to conventions and all of the nerdy things that we love. This was going to be my first year going to a convention, so that didn't work out very well. But I felt really fortunate to be a part of this great fandom and many fandoms actually. And so I'm hoping we'll all get to be together soon.
Very soon. Thank you, Amy, and I really appreciate that. That optimism, that's what we need right now. Thank you for that. Let's keep that going. That's good stuff, because we are right around the corner from this. I mean, look, there's a lot of people have been through a lot worse in life. So we can be patient a little bit longer.
Yeah, and it'll be worth that patience in the end. So we'll get there.
And I would just hope that after this experience, we all realize that frontline workers are underappreciated and underpaid, and it would be nice if we could change that.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
I just want to say, just sort of coming back around, is there anything about the Muppet Christmas Carol we didn't touch on that you guys would like to highlight real quick?
I would no. I would say that you're very lucky. All of us are very lucky that Michael Caine decided not to play it like Steve Martin, like coming on stage and going, "Hey, I'm in a Muppet movie, yeah." You know, we should just be grateful that Michael Caine had the damn common sense to think like a real actor and think about the impact of the story in real terms. And that's why every time they interview him, he goes back and he says this was his favorite role and how much he loved singing that song and the one that was cut. So we just, you can say hours and hours worth of praise for the Muppet performers and for the stamina of Brian trying to step into his father's shoes, his late father's shoes. But I give the lion's share of the credit to Michael Caine continuing to work with these little pieces of cloth as if everything is at stake. And it's really wonderful, really wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, I think him taking it seriously, but also having that kind of also the whimsical feel of the Muppets at the same time, that's really a hard line to toe. And I think that he did just a really amazing job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've said it a million times, but this is the movie that I always go back to every year. There's other holiday classics. One of we didn't get to it this year, but I'm sure next year Amy and I will do a stream on Love Actually. That's another one that her and I love. But
I have one gripe about that movie, and for me that is just very, very surprising.
I couldn't tell by your reaction, Cliff. I was like, either he feels negative about it.
No, I love it. I secretly love that movie. I tell you the truth. But you want to go back to 1947 and the original Miracle on 34th Street holds up, and it holds up way better than you think. I mean, go look at Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye in White Christmas. It's boring. It's boring as hell. Someone, put me out of my misery. But when you go to 1947, Miracle on 34th Street is snappy, sharp, fun, and there's a little tiny baby Natalie Wood. It's so good.
Oh God, that's so tragic. That's actually my dad's favorite Christmas movie, and every time I watch that, because those in the chat who know me know I'm a true crime fan. Not a fan of it happening. I just like to learn about it. So every time I see Natalie Wood, my heart breaks. Yeah, but that's my dad's favorite Christmas movie, and for him, it's not Christmas until he's watched Miracle. So
Miracle, I know. See, now some people will hold fast, and they'll say their favorite Christmas movie is X, Y, or Z. And for me, I'm the Tim Burton stop motion animation guy who always loves Nightmare Before Christmas. I love that stuff. But I love this version, this Muppet version, and I think that I have to thank you, Amy, especially for your insights, and John, because you guys have reminded me many times over why this is one of my very favorites. So thank you for that, and thank you for letting me be part of this conversation tonight. It's wonderful.
No, I really want to thank you for coming back on, Cliff. It's always a joy to talk to you, and I'm glad we could do, again, another conversation on something Henson related, because I think you and I both really clicked on our shared love for Dark Crystal, and also this movie is just, it's been one of my favorites for such a long time. So I'm very happy to talk with you about it, man.
It's a pleasure. Now, if anybody out there has Amazon Prime, go and watch Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. It is another ultimate Jim Henson classic. Wonderful.
Yeah, I actually shockingly haven't heard of it, but I'm going to check that out now.
Get back to me after you do. It's wonderful stuff. Oh my God. I love it. Spreading the joy, spread the knowledge. It's great.
Will do. Okay, so real quick, we're just trying to go through once again what we have coming up next week right here on John Webster Film, or as Amy likes to say, Jawoof. We next week at 7:00 p.m. we're going to be talking about the new film Wonder Woman 1984. The week after that, we will be returning with Jared for another Knights of Kira stream for A Dangerous Method. So, and then we got lots of stuff coming down the road. We're going to be talking, stuff like X-Men, Pan's Labyrinth. We're doing a Mean Girls stream. That's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you go ahead and come back for all of those. So, So Amy, I always point the wrong way. What do you got coming up?
Please check out my channel. I'm going to keep it really short this time, but like I said, I have some Song of Ice and Fire and His Dark Materials content already up. I study Chinese literature, so I look at them through Eastern symbolism, and I've got The Witcher, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and the Poppy War content coming up. And I want to say happy holidays and a happy new year from us here at Jawoof.
And Cliff, go ahead and tell the folks what you've been doing lately and also where they can find you.
You can just follow us every Tuesday at theonering.net on our various social channels, because I'll be hosting the live stream for The One Ring. We also have new stories coming out, published on the main website, related to the big casting announcement from Amazon Studios and that big, huge information download they gave us with all the new diverse actors and actresses in their Middle-earth TV series. And right now, we actively are in the middle of a Lord of the Rings movie watch-along experience. We can watch along the movies with Doug Adams and myself and Jim J. Ware doing a deep dive on Howard Shore's music and the compositions and music of the film scores of the Lord of the Rings. Look for more tomorrow and in coming days for The Two Towers and The Return of the King. And we already did the Hobbit movie scores like a month or two ago, but right now we're doing Rings. So follow along at theonering.net.
And I want to, again, push for you guys to check out a stream that Amy and I did over on her channel called Buddy Banter, where we talked about gender stereotypes and the way that influences the film and TV we watch. Please check that out. It was really great, and I'd love for more people to see it. And tune in to Here Be Dragons tomorrow at 6 o'clock for a discussion of the rest of season 2 of The Mandalorian. All right. Thank you guys so much. This was so much fun. And, now I feel like Christmas is complete because we had a great big conversation about my favorite Christmas movie. So thank you.
Happy holidays to everyone out there. I was alone this Christmas out of an abundance of caution. My parents are in a hot spot right now, so I didn't want to, expose them to anything. But, I got to be with all of you guys, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm good. Everybody, just stay safe and get through this. I've tested COVID negative 8 times this year, and I'll be damned, I've got a few more tests to go, and I'm still going to dodge this thing. So I must be doing something right. So let's do it. Let's do it right. I can't
be safe, wear a mask, socially distance.
For a lot of other people who I know who've been through it in my family and in my production company and my neighbors and people I know. So people are going through it, but just be super careful so we can get out on the other side. And then we can have those hobbity good gatherings again, and we can have drinks and parties. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Very soon.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Cliff, again for coming on. And thank you to our viewers for watching. We will see you next week, and have a joyous rest of the holidays. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.